cloud. Okay.
Mhm.
Hello.
Hello again, and the cloud too.
I know. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
I actually think this is like the first time I'm actually I'm seeing you. one,
That's true. This is
yeah,
true. We're usually connected by phone.
right, exactly. So, um, I I am so thrilled to be speaking to you today because I know that as you've inspired me, you are inspiring hundreds and thousands of people and
Right.
many more over the years, I'm sure, because you're bringing back Italian magic.
Oh,
you're,
thank you.
you're,
It's really
you're,
thanks to the spirits. I'm just really the vehicle, I have to tell you.
I know. You also have a huge heart and an incredible talent. And I have just been so blessed to have you as a mentor and learn from you. So yeah, I'm really,
Thank
really
you.
thrilled.
That was a lot. Thank you so much. Wow.
It's how I feel. But but now I have you here. I know that I know that you're normally a very private person, so I'm not going to ask you too many crazy questions.
That's okay.
Um, but I would love to know how you started with your connection to Italy and uncovering all of this magic.
Well, I have to say it's a long story because, as a child, I was very aware of the spirit world being as real as my physical world. And um, even as a child, I was moving through interests in culture. I was really interested, like in the fairies of the Celtic world. And I thought maybe I'll go end up living in Ireland or somewhere. I did go live there briefly, but in England and Scotland, but I didn't stay. And I was always obsessed with Italian artwork, especially like Byzantine artwork and the colors, not so much the religious aspect. I felt like there was something more to a story there, but I was really drawn to Italy. And I only got to, through that whole time period, visit Italy once when I was in a band and we were on tour. But what ended up happening was in like 12, 13 years ago now, oh my, time is hard for me to tell time. But I started, well, I went to Italy. Oh, it was longer than that. Now, 2008, I think it was. I went to Italy, not knowing really anything about the world of psychic mediums. I mean, I knew who I was, but I didn't know what to call these things. And I had guides that I trusted. I was aware of things, but I didn't know anything about the history of witches. I was just learning Reiki, and I ended up in Italy. And it was sort of a magical story because I was going to make an album with an acquaintance I had who was a producer, and he invited in the middle of Italy in Toscana, and he invited in another Italian musician to work on this project with me. We ended up becoming really fast friends through the internet. Like I would levitate out of bed when his email would arrive at 2 in the morning. We were having all sorts of incredible experiences, like
I
the
love
universe
that.
come to life. And before I arrived in the guest house where I was going to stay with him to record this album for 3 months, and I was planning on just staying there, he said, I feel like there's a presence in this house waiting for you. And I said, oh, I feel it too. And I thought it was maybe like the house, or spirits of the house. But when I arrived in Tuscany at midnight, when I arrived, um, you know, the little house we lived in, it had a pomegranate tree right outside the
Wow.
door. We were surrounded by, olive fields, olive trees, and wineries. So we were literally in the countryside, little castle on the hill, and went to bed, woke up in the morning to take my shower. And maybe for some people, for me, the bathroom is a place where I really feel a lot of spirit coming through because of the water. And there was like a witch spirit. That's the only way I can describe her. I knew her energy since I was a child, and we talked about it in that moment. I tried to change her appearance to make sure I wasn't imagining these things. And she became my teacher for the rest of that time period in Tuscany, because the album project fell apart, or maybe we should say that that brought everything together.
Yeah.
And so Davide ended up taking me all over, he had a car, and all over Italy to these places where she guided us to go. So moving to the future, she came back with us to America. He came back with me too. And she started teaching me all sorts of things about healing. I would just write down the notes because I didn't know if these were real. She pushed me in to train as a medium. I didn't know that a medium was an actual thing. And I started going to this spiritualist school that's connected to Lilydale and the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. So you're constantly testing yourself in groups of people for getting evidential readings. And that really opened up my world, or I could say it reorganized my world. And I was able to understand a lot of things that were happening. But at a certain point, I became the president, the secretary of the board. I was really involved with this place. And at a certain point, I started having all of these dreams about Italian history, goddesses, magical practices,
Wow.
different armies and cultural groups that came through. And I thought, well, I don't know what all this is. I wrote it all down. At the same time, my Italian husband, I didn't know I had married into a lineage family with Yanara witches and healers
Oh,
until later. But at this same time period, when I was having these visions, he went back to visit his mother and they went to Benevento for me and picked up some books. And she sent me a box full of like stones and woods and little sewing needles from her mother and all sorts of little tools.
wow.
Um, and so these divinities were visiting me in all of my meditations. They were telling me to go to the tree and channel information for your classes. It was like the information from the spirit world was coming from all over at this point, but it was all about Italy. It was all about channeling. It was all about feel like follow your instincts to do put these herbs in your bra and all of these things that I just said, okay, I trust you, my guides. You've always been the ones that I could trust in my life over people, but I don't know what any of this means. So I kept it really quiet and wrote everything down. Come to find out later, these were like the traditions that my mother-in-law's mother did or taught
Wow.
her family, or that these visions I saw really happen in Italy. And so I devoted myself to return there and just let myself get lost in small little villages, hopefully connect with people by giving them bread and just hearing their stories. But once I opened myself up to do that, all these people from Italy found me and said, I know this old lady who lives in the mountain. She's like 100 and she heals people. She's known as the local witch and somehow she's waiting for you. Can I take you to meet her? Of course. And it was just kind of like everything opened up. And when I would meet these people, they were speaking dialect. So with my limited Italian, even, I couldn't understand them. But I was able to channel in the moment, and the spirits helped us understand each other. My friends were there also to translate later. But it was really a spirit guided experience. I had other plans. I was not, I was expecting to go for 3 months and come back to my life. So I really tell people like this was not anything I could have predicted happening. But it started in this way. Like my life was sort of preparing me to channel, to download, to be a medium. Then I found the way to practice doing it. And then it was like, boof, okay, now we're putting you out in the field. I was like, okay.
Wow.
So it
That's
was very,
incredible.
yes, it's kind of like
It's
that.
incredible. And from what I understand as well from reading your books and working with you, this is actually also a quintessentially Italian way, right? Or this old
Yes.
European way of connecting with the goddess through nature and channeling.
Yes. And I found out that through, especially with my new book coming out, I'm using a lot of photographs so people can sort of identify things that they may have found in like the box of their grandma's belongings. But I think people around the world who know some of their ancestors' traditions will see the common threads or similar objects. But the ones that I'm finding out are specifically rural Italian. Yes, some of the remnants have survived in contemporary families. But they are similar things that you can find all over Europe. But yes, every year, not this year, I go and live in Italy for like 3 months, and I have friends there that are my landing pads, and then I take up invitations and I go, to places
Yeah.
where sometimes no one speaks my language and I speak just a little of theirs. And they take me to people to watch them doing their work. It's really wild.
It sounds like a real mission, the real mission that you have. That's so important as well, because, especially for our generation of Italians, we've like completely lost some of our ancestral traditions. And in fact, I think you speak about it in your new book around how the church was implicated and how, like, after the 50s, was it the 50s? In the 50s that this magic just disappeared, or even before?
It was a little bit before that. I mean, certainly during, the 1500s when the witch hunt started, um, we can also say when the Romans came on the scene and started documenting things, they did note that a lot of these traditions that they sort of took, because the Romans were great collectors and learners, and rearranged, came from people who were already practicing them. So then we have, like the Romans coming on the scene and blending things and taking things outside the home and putting them in public temples and making some of those things off limits for people. If you weren't noble or elite, you could go to the temple and offer or request things, but if you were noble and elite, you couldn't practice in the inner school. And then we have like the middle period where magic, was kind of everywhere, but people were using magic to get out of arranged marriages. The church in Italy was arranging marriages, or people were trying to get lovers, or people would try, as I was described it, people would use magic from anywhere as long as it like kept the family happy, kept the crops growing. But still in the rural world, we have people who inherit their magical medico-magical traditions, but people outside those family lineages in the more contemporary cities, even 1500s is contemporary, magically speaking, things got lost because everyone was sort of going more DIY with it rather than being spiritually led or
Yeah.
led from spirits. So things became more conceptual, bit more disconnected from nature, but you could kind of think your way back to the concept. And so that was a really big time period where the last remaining connections to like a divine feminine universe were really stamped out by masculine organization needing to put things in books and then keep them from the people who were seeking the
Yeah.
information in those books. But also in Italy, Italians there in the anthropological world call the 1950s the deculturalization. And that's where we had these very insular rural villages who really didn't have a lot of outside influence other than to sell some of the food that they grow or process. They started, like they say, our bread ovens went cold then in the rural world, and people had to break up their communities or go other places to find a way to live because that insular way was hard to maintain. But it lasted. A lot of these villages still were delivering their own babies and
Yeah.
processing their own wheat, which is a really big process until like the 1980s and even later in some places. So I mean, there's a village called the Black Valley that's known as like a little village witch village. Didn't have outsiders until 1980s because you just
Yeah.
couldn't get to the terrain.
Oh my.
So, maybe a wanderer would wander in, but there was no tourism or anything.
Oh my goodness, it's incredible. I've sort of felt this all around me, and I have some older aunties and women who have been a part of my life that have some of that, but it is very hush hush, and it's not really something that they share very openly, and unless you ask them.
And for people who haven't been to Italy, there is still that lingering, not in the younger generations, but there is still this lingering fear about the church. Now, if you are someone who starts to find some of the books written by Italians that are anthropological, or if you meet some of these people who really know their traditions and they kind of keep the oral traditions alive there, you'll find that, in America, I mean, we're experiencing some of this idea now of the world going into your home or your neighborhood. But in Italy, in the witch hunt period, even like this little village that I visited, Triora, it's almost 3,000, feet up in the air. It was still an important passage of travel. And when the inquisitors were traveling around, they would just go into the village, take people out without
Yeah.
documenting them. And then all of the neighbors were looking at everyone else. It was sort of a way that villages and the lifestyles were very invaded. So if it was invaded by fear, or if it was invaded
Mm.
by torture and kidnapping, you have to think like everyone's watching you. Like
Yeah.
when you go to smaller Italian villages, even now, like the women are on their corridor, the
Yeah.
men are outside the cafes, and everyone's talking about their local gossip. If you're an outsider, everyone knows you're there within like 30 minutes of arrival. So there's a culture of, knowing everyone and watching everyone, which can be great. Or if there's fear running through, which the Inquisition was really trying to stamp out midwives and healers, then that fear runs rampant. And so you'll find that people still keep these things really close to the chest. And
Yeah.
even though they say that, even though some of them call their cures spells, they're like, I'm not a witch. A witch is someone who does black magic and kills or harms. They differentiate between magic that helps and magic that harms, knowing that everyone has both abilities. But the term,
Mhm.
but if you read books or you're trying to understand the folk stories or the rural village stories, it can be a little confusing to see like witches talking about protecting against witches, and that's where it
See,
comes from.
there's a lot of layers, and it does seem to be still very much ingrained in our psyche.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, can we talk a little bit about magic and the
Great.
things that you're teaching as well? Because I
Sure.
know you also have your online school, and you do channeling circles as well online.
Yes.
Um, but I'm curious to know like how you define the Italian tradition of divination. I know you've spoken about malocchio before.
Yes.
Does it differ at all from other kinds of divination, or?
Yes. Now, I have specifically been put on this path of learning rural traditions. So traditions that were born in like agricultural communities where people lived off the land, took care of themselves, again, birthed their own babies or went to the community midwife, washed their clothes at the wells and things like this, well into the 1980s, even with the deculturalization. This is different from like middle period magic. Now, a lot of people think that there's like an Italian version of Wicca, and that's not really true. There's a lot of versions of Italian Wicca made by contemporary people. My experiences have taken me into the rural world, and in the rural world we have shamanism. Shamanism is a practice that is defined by the spirits who pick the people and pass down their traditions, which is why Italian rural shamanism has common threads from all the shamanism you can find around the world. Of course, the really specific links are like Siberia, early Turkey, Central Asia, and places like this. But the reason it is a shamanism is because in the rural world, there is no practice of meditating to learn how to channel. There's passive channeling. There is no school to go to learn, where you get to inherit some books and you learn the secrets. Sure, here and there's a book. It's oral tradition, and these people who inherit the traditions, usually through family lines, but I'll also talk about how it happens outside of family lines, because I don't want people to feel that if you don't know your family and you feel there's a magic call there, that you're off limits to that magic. You're not, and we can talk about that.
Mhm.
But in the real world, things were passed through family lines, or like if you got married into a family, they were crisscrossed. There were masculine and feminine lines, but they were inherited already fully formed. You don't change the cure or the magic ritual to suit your new client, or to suit the time period. And they were inherited from the spirit world long ago. And a lot of families can trace back their lineages, hundreds of years. And they're done, it's all oral tradition. Here and there, someone may have like a little book with some of the plant names, and they're usually spelled wrong because, even, some elders I know now are not so literate as we
Yeah.
are. Um, And so it's the spirits that work through these rituals, the magic, the ceremonies. And so what people receive, some people receive an energy charge in their hands. They receive special secret prayers. And that's really the what I call the passive channeling key. Instead of like raising their vibration in a meditation, although there are rituals and ways to do this, they receive like a magic prayer. And that prayer is the key that turns on, the door saying, okay, divine feminine, please channel through these words
Wow.
to my client. And each prayer is specific for an illness or a, psychic illness or a physical illness or a ritual for something. So, and then people learn how to use the very simple matter that is near them: olive leaves, olive oil, maybe juniper grows near them, so it's a lot of the same plants, a lot of universal plants, but just like you find in shaman communities where there is a shaman, that shaman is taught how to use the animal parts or how to assimilate animal calls and voices from the animals that are in their vicinity. They learn how to use the plants in the vicinity, but they all learn from the spirit world. And there is a union in a way with the spirit world. What we see in rural Italy is that there are a lot of female practitioners devoted to like a Madonna or
Mhm.
a goddess, and maybe they don't want to talk about which goddess with you, or female saints is kind of like guides in spirit that they can identify with. Um,
Yeah.
but it all of this comes through, everyone knows it's not their own power they're using. Sure, maybe I'm sure there's like contemporary charlatans here or there. So it's
Yeah.
they know that there's energy moving through them. Some of them will talk to you about it, that yes, we work with the spirits. Some people don't like to talk about it because then it's a little bit scary talking,
Mhm.
based on
Yeah.
understanding. But it's
Sure.
all relying on working with spirits, which is why my school tries to emphasize, learning a little bit of channeling and knowing that, yes, you can learn the materials and, learn the actions, but if the spirits want to work through you, they will.
Right. So, in fact, if you don't, if you can't speak to your great great grandmother who used to, live in Italy or, what have you, then the channeling is a good way to connect to your lineage,
Absolutely.
even though you don't live in Italy anymore.
Absolutely. And in fact, I met a male healer. He was Sicilian and had no intentions of ever being a healer in his life, but he was born into a family where his grandfather on his father's side, his father's father, was a healer who was really powerful, but didn't talk about his abilities, but people would go to him everywhere to be healed, come to him from everywhere to be healed. And when he had done something to this man when he was a child, like put his hands on his head, and he said that I wrote about him in my book. His name's Eve, but just to encourage people, Eve said that, after his grandfather laid his hands on his head, he would find himself levitating, as a child, and some experiences that he didn't really know how to process. And then when his grandfather had not passed on his healing ability to anyone in the family, because if they're not guided by spirit to pass it to someone, they don't. Some people really must pass it on. Like the tradition is they have to pass that power to someone else so it can leave their body and go to whoever needs it. But for example, if they feel no one is going to use it in the family, then that line dies out. But so his grandfather died, and all he left behind was a ring with a black stone. I talk about black stones in my first book a lot and the new one. And everyone in the family was fighting over it, but they would try to wear it and they would get really, really sick. And so they'd have to give it up. And one day, Eve was just sort of playing around and he put the ring on, and it seemed like it was made for him. And he started feeling his grandfather near him. And then what happened was, on one of the solstice and equinox clocks, which are very important for these times of ritual initiation, his grandfather's spirits went to his father, so the in-between parent who's still living in the flesh. And the grandfather said, you have to put your hands on Eve's head so I can give him something. And the father was like, oh, leave me alone. I don't believe in this. Finally, he agreed to it. And Eve received that energy transmission from the spirit world through his father, who wasn't a healer, to himself. Now he's a famous healer living in France. They have photographs of him with like red and blue lights coming out of his hands. He's also embraced a lot of modern healing technologies, but he mostly works with his grandfather's spirit to continue to learn how to use the energy.
That's wonderful. And actually, you helped me do something very similar because my great grandmother, Nonna Celestina, she was a total witch, but she didn't pass it on to her four girls. Actually, one of them a little bit, but not very much. And then when it was time for me to pick it up, I was feeling something going on, but I enlisted your support, and you sort of really opened up that channel for me. So. Yeah, so it was very powerful. But is there a meaning with the red and the blue lights?
That I haven't found out.
Oh, okay.
Because I see like white and golden lights, sometimes different colors, but the red and blue I thought was very interesting. It must be a frequency of the healing energy that's coming through, maybe like polarities of color that,
Yeah.
do something within the body. He didn't talk about that. And I'm very curious. And I actually never asked my guides about it. So maybe that
All right.
might be a
No,
mission.
I feel like it. Yeah, go on.
Well, before I went to the second time I stayed in Italy to, just devote myself to learn whatever was going to be taught to me, I did see light moving in frequencies and patterns that I later found out, had a meaning. But I actually didn't ask about the red and blue light from the universe, so I'm not sure. But I'm sure it has some kind of significance there.
Yes.
Vibration,
Yeah,
frequency.
yes, exactly. Because I feel like I've seen that red and blue before, and it does speak to me of
Oh.
polarities. But I also feel like as I was just sort of getting ready to speak to you, and I was getting into the zone, I was feeling a lot of that gold and black that you were talking about. That sounds like you channel, and specifically a black serpent. And I so am I onto something there?
Yes, so a lot of the divinities that made themselves known to me, when they made themselves known to me in a certain form, because I've met, divinities that I call, you know, just like this great being of white golden light that she won't put herself into form, very, very old. And I talked to her about some people in readings. And she also, I died when I was younger and came back. Obviously, I'm here. And she also pulled me out of my body so that I got to experience, what it was like to actually be in, when people say, the light or in the all. But so I had the guide that I met in Italy when I was there, who was sort of my gatekeeper. And she then brought in this white light being who was, wow, you know, showed me a lot of things, and taught me a lot of things through experiencing and feeling things in my body. And then I met a lot of other divinities that people call Iside or Isis,
Uh-huh.
Ecate or Hecate, and onward, Demeter, Ceres, Proserpina, Santa Lucia, on and on and on and on. But the goddess Iside, as she's called in Italy, is so connected with like the black stones and the black serpents. And in the south of Italy, she has a huge presence, even among little old ladies who go to church and carry their black stones with them,
I love that.
because she's the mother with the child, and she's like, a very old mother. And the golden light is connected to a lot of these divinities, especially one that I, learned was called Cibele, whose stories sound really wild out there, but whose truths go really, much deeper. So a lot of people feel these energies from me, like white light or golden light or black serpents and other very symbolic things connected to these Italian teachings. So they're speaking to you, through me, but you're receiving the symbols. And
Yeah.
I always like to tell people, if you see those symbols, start researching them, because that means they want to take you on a journey back through time to connect some dots. So I don't want to tell you everything, and I'd like to let you have your journey unfold. But
It's so beautiful. I'm a huge, fan of Isis and
oh,
that lineage. And but it's an interesting sort of crossover, I suppose, between the Italy and ancient Egypt. Like sometimes my brain doesn't really compute how the two go together.
Yes, and also, another figure who has been sort of mixed up in Middle Period magic is Hecate or Ecate, however you want to say her name. In rural Italy, she's connected to in a very different way from like more contemporary magic. In For Iside in southern Italy, there's also differences. For example, oh gosh, I cannot remember the name of the emperor who built a temple to her in Benevento, very
Mm.
masculinized, temple. But in the homes of women living in the mountain valleys there, or on the little mountains, in Pina and Campania, especially all these little villages there, Avellino, Ciappelloni, they're also connected to Cibele and very old forms of the goddess. So back to these rural ideas of shamanism and connection, when you look at the very earliest time periods, women had to know how to take care of their babies because they were coming out of their bodies. And you can't have trial and error here with, babies being born and dying and mothers dying. There would be no population. And so we can find also in stories around the world where the divine intervened and gave people the information they needed. And in Italy, we see that, even the domestic goddess temples, like Malta time period, pre-Egyptian period, were in the homes of women using the same grains that were used in rural Italy to venerate divine feminine beings, lentils, millet, wheat, things like this. And of course, the symbol, the parallel on earth for the divine feminine was the mother, not, and it was believed that everyone came through mother, all of the genders. There was no, like in rural Italy, we don't find the God figure and the goddess. And
Mhm.
people refer to even Mary as the mother of God. They're like, yeah, there's God and Jesus, and, but we love the mother of God. So the symbol, the parallel symbol for divinity on earth, aside from being like trees and water, was the body of the mother, because she's holding the baby, she's going to the wells and receiving through the conduit of water all the knowledge she needs about plants, how to teach her baby, how to feed her baby, how to nurture her baby, how to restore her own body. And if in fact, if you just research, Italian nursery rhymes, filastrocca, you'll find that there's all this hidden symbolism about water, about nature, about mothering and the mountains and all of the symbols of the mother connected to that. So if you look at Easy Day or Isis as, if you just were to like Google Isis or Easy Day, what do you see most commonly? Her solitary on a statue holding a baby. Yes,
Yeah.
she's connected to, her husband figure at a certain point. But in Italy, what you'll find about her stories that was so embraced was the fact that she was a mother, but not just that, that she was also a lover, a healer, a sorceress, that she taught men how to honor the female energy, that her priestesses and children were serpents. We also find in very family centric Southern Italian traditions, very secretive ones, that her serpent serves as a messenger to initiate them. They may have dreams of a serpent crossing a river over and over again,
Yeah.
meaning like the threshold. And when they're ready, that serpent will change color, or its eyes will change color, or something will happen to indicate, okay, we're raising you up a new level. The serpent messenger is going to convey this to you one way or another.
Yeah.
And the serpent is one of the oldest divine feminine symbols. Um, and it's just so pervasive throughout Italy, especially in places where there were, you know, snakes and scorpions, and there's all sorts of other meanings there. But the regenerative power is the one that has been clamored over so much in the battle over religion and spirituality, right? And even governments. And originally that was celebrated as a feminine one, coming from the womb and the blood, and, all the parallels that exist in nature reminding us of that. So that's why, and Africa is not so far from Italy. And, so that ancient mother, Iside, but also having the power to channel all of the knowledge that she has to her priestesses, to her daughters and sons, or, her children and followers, is part of that. So it's a symbol of earthly parallel to all the potentials that the divine feminine it holds as energies, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, it does absolutely. But growing up in a very Catholic environment, which was so patriarchal, and
Yes.
where there was not even any mention of the Magdalene at all. She didn't even exist. So I grew up in the flip scenario where the feminine was just completely eliminated.
Yes,
So
totally
this is
hidden.
why, yeah, that's why it's just so nourishing to hear this and to bring this back to life.
And that's one of the
Um,
fun things about a lot of the rural magic is it's very in plain sight. And, I have to tell you that I grew up as a child, having to go to church and realizing there's so much hypocrisy here. That was my experience. And, I felt like I was there to learn about it, but I realized how masculinized it was. And there was like there were genders missing from religion. Like, what about the women? What about people of other genders? They're just like disincluded from this spiritual
yeah.
story. Where's the womb? And but also contemporary magic that a lot of people gravitate towards, like Wiccan magic, is also not inclusive to people of other genders. There's just a symbol of a binary marriage there, right? God and goddess. So, learning these things through people in Italy, like being in the fields, meeting people, I certainly had a little like slight allergic reaction at first, like, oh, am I going to have to learn about Madonnas and saints? Like, do I have to embrace this? But I have to tell you that I was taught to connect to them through a lot of the channeling prayers, the passive keys to channeling I mentioned. And wow, the energy that comes through, you realize, oh, it's not wearing an outfit. It doesn't belong to the church. It's divine feminine. This was a way for women to still be able to connect to feminine energy. And that spirit comes through so powerfully, not limited by the church at all.
Yes.
But until you like have the experience, so you just kind of think like, oh, ew.
Right, exactly. Well, I had a similar experience when I was starting to pray the rosary again, but doing
Ooh,
it in a way that was removed from the church. And it was a really beautiful way to connect with
lovely,
Mother Mary again. Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah. But I also really love the fact that you identify this Italian magic as being shamanic,
Yes.
because it resonates with me so much. And I really felt that I could never really call myself a witch, or that I didn't
Yes.
really feel any resonance
Me
with the
too.
Wiccan. But when I started reading your books and working with you, I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I've been doing.
Yes.
I'm very shamanic in my relationship to the world, and it's very direct, either
Yes.
through spirit or through the plant world. It's just very direct. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, shamanism is there's the shaman in the community, and then there's the community. And I write about this in my new book, Italian Magic: Secret Lives of Women, coming up, to give you an understanding and some parallels that, it's the spirits who work through the shaman they choose to really unfold all of the information and the connections. And the community around the shaman also celebrates some of these rituals in a very similar, like with threads of connection to the teachings of the spirits. So it's really exciting to see how it goes together in that way. But
Mm.
yeah, it's very different from just doing it on your own and looking up spells or calculating your own thing. It's it is very different. It's like you're reliant on a higher source of knowledge and guidance, and that's where the magic really unfolds and moves through limitations even more.
Yes, beautiful. Could you tell us a little bit about your trance circles? Because I also find that word very fascinating, and I know that you hold them
Sure.
online sometimes. Yeah, the
Okay,
trance
yeah,
in the night.
trance is very interesting, and it's a different experience for whoever participates. For example, when I went to that spiritualist school that I mentioned to you, they had some special guests coming through, and an Italian woman, Letizia, came through with her British husband, and she gave a trance circle. And I thought, oh, this is so fascinating. Um, so I had an experience of what the circle was like. But for me, and the trances that I give is a little bit different, because for the person who's transmitting the trance, there are a variety of levels of awareness you can have, that you make an agreement with the spirits who come through you. Like Letizia, for example, her body would sort of slump over, her eyes would be closed. So her husband would invite the people into the circle and basically talk to them and invite them to ask the questions of her guides through her when it was the time. But she was already deeply entranced. And the way she described her experiences, she felt like she was sitting in a small room behind her body, watching everything that would go on, because she also wanted to learn. But like Edgar Cayce, some people have heard of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping medium. He was also completely entranced when he did trance. When I give trance, I had to learn how to hold those energies in my body, which are the energies of the spirits coming through, so that other people could have the experience, but so that I was also aware and conscious enough to lead people through the guided meditation that I offer as part of the trance, and make sure to hold the circle. So I take people through a guided meditation, and the scripts change. Sometimes the scripts take us to one place or another, and they're peppered with a lot of these Italian prayers and invocations that have been used traditionally to ask for flight to the moon. Yes, from
Yeah.
rural Italy, there are prayers asking for flight to the moon, or to, go to the cave or the mountain mother's place, or honoring different divine feminine, beings. And those bring through, some of the energy for the people who are in the trance. Now, the people experiencing it, I just call it guided meditation plus extra, because the spirits that are coming through me to give everyone experience will tailor make the experience for whatever it is you're ready for. Some people fall into a trance and they don't really remember a lot because they're feeling a lot of energies in their body that are really moving really, really fast. Some people find themselves in the guided meditation being able to astral travel without fear, whereas maybe before they were afraid. Some people get to meet their ancestors. Some people just have a really lovely guided meditation experience. Some people will continue to heal through their dreams after the trance. So it's like a guided meditation, but the energies of the spirits come through and give each person what they're asking for or what they're ready for. And there have been some times where I've given readings after these two from these, guides or beings. They're very different from my usual readings, but yeah, it's an experience that's a little bit different from like a regular meditation.
I see. So is trance sort of like a turned up version of channeling? Is it just
Yes,
like
it
an
is
extra
like
powerful channeling?
yes, like with channeling, you can kind of, I imagine it like you can raise your vibration up so that you can perceive more information, or maybe you learn, like you maybe feel like you have little dials on your psychic radio and you can tune into the voices of your guides or other helpers who have knowledge. In trance, I am actually allowing the energies of these beings to, they kind of like fit in my body a little bit, or they take up space along with my spirit. And so what that feels like is that I had to go through a process of learning how to do this. In the beginning, they would make me take little naps, and they would show me how this was going to happen in the naps, or they would adjust my frequency. So we would do things together in the naps, or they would give me special words to say. Now, for example, some days before I would give a trance in person, I wouldn't eat for a whole 24 hours. I would be living on the light, which was a great feeling. I
Wow.
really wish I could go back to that. It was really spectacular. And then, but I would also have feelings of numbness. People use flying ointments, right, to try to get their body to fall asleep so their mind stays awake and their spirit travels. Well, I was feeling the guides come into my body and make like parts of my arms completely numb, or parts of my jaw even really numb, so that they could blend their energies with some space, take up some partnership space in my body, so that when I use my voice, which is really important for the trances that I do, when I'm saying those prayers or saying those invocations, their energy is coming through the sound. Um, which is, why I don't need to be with you. And so they're but it's almost like you can imagine they're all like saying, let's go sit with Karyn, but they're literally sitting with me. And so my body is like going really, really numb, and their energy is in me. So I'm able to, see things differently. It's like channeling, but with like X-ray eyes, X-ray ears, a lot of extra in my body. With it's like we're hanging out together.
My goodness, that sounds that sounds wild.
It's
And
very, very wild, and
yeah,
it's a process to learn how to
right.
do it, you know?
So so in a way you learn it too. I mean, or do you think there's people out there who are having these experiences, but they just can't put those words to it, or they
Yes, some people will, they will like go into their own meditation and they will suddenly feel like they're watching a movie or that the movie is taking place around them. Likely they're really feeling trance moving through them. Another thing that I find out that happens is a lot to masculine identified people um, m- who a lot of masculine identified people, because of societal pressures, haven't learned how to receive things in their body, and also don't necessarily receive things in the body the same way as feminine or feminine blended people do. We're used to feeling more emotions in our body or the feelings of other people, and maybe not even realizing we're receiving information. And with trance, you have to receive, you have to take in, you have to share your space. So what happens to a lot of male identified people is what I call like jump ins. Maybe like a male relative dies and they suddenly feel like their cousin or their uncle or their grandpa is in their body for a few seconds. They don't know how to you know they have different there's boundary work to do to understand like what's safe, how much can come in, what do I agree with, and what is just happening to me. So there's some different levels of excitement of trance happening and scariness of trance happening. um, but it does take practice. But yes,
yeah.
people don't need to know what trance
Hmm.
is to have it happening. And it can be a little bit scary. But when you are like a sign is like, let's say you're meditating and you're feeling like you're seeing a movie come alive around you, or you almost feel like you're starting to fall asleep a little bit in your own meditation, that's an indication that the energy that's moving through you is moving so quickly, and got the energy of these beings is so it's not embodied, so it's very, very quick. It's actually a light being. We're physical matter and light being. They're light beings, so you will feel that speediness almost make you fall asleep. And that's an indication that trance is, you're being entranced by your helpers and guides.
Wow, that's amazing. And so are you teaching this also? Are you doing some trainings on
I
this sort
haven't
of
been
thing?
guided to give trance yet, but I am guided to sort of help guide people sometimes in personal readings. If I see, if the guides are telling me this person, really needs to practice dream work, because this, especially Hecate or Ecate, she really likes to teach people trance through a process that starts with daydream work, not nighttime dreams, but it goes into that. Recognizing things in daydream work, using prayers and the power of your voice. It's like the little stepping stones to get there. So I don't know if they'll want me to teach channeling, but I do guide people who are already moving into that, not even knowing it, how to understand, because there are also some things that people can feel and not recognize, like panic or anxiety. There are a lot of spiritual people who are, moving along, and they'll have days where they feel a tremendous amount of anxiety or nervousness, like almost like someone's waiting for them. Oh, sorry for all this weird light. They're like, or there's this pressure, and they feel really anxious. And I let them know, well, that idea of panic, right? There is this is an ancient way of learning. Trance is very, very ancient. It's not contemporary. And the way that people find that they have a new guide, or that a guide wants to connect with them and move in a much more deep way, which means that you have to give up some of your own preconceived human ideas about what that means and let the spirits really teach you, is that you'll feel this pressing, this pressure. And if you recognize that pressure is not your human anxiety, but a change happening on a spirit level, then you can go, okay, this means I need to take a daydream. I'll let myself see
Wow.
what they want to teach me through the daydreams. And it's a process, but it's recognizing some of the signs and symbols. And it would be really exciting. I would really love it if my guides want me to teach trance in the future, because everything that they're teaching me to share, now there's a lot that I can't share, but everything that they are teaching me to share is, helping people to connect to knowledge where when they think that knowledge is maybe off limits. Like I mentioned earlier, there are the lineages, but I also have talked about the night school and La Signora del Gioco for
Yes.
people. I go into depth about this in my new book. And this is a spirit that, and there are spirits, sometimes there's 7 of them or more. So people have a lot of experiences where, these spirits come and pull them out of their bodies in their dreams, like when they're going to sleep at night, to astral travel and take them to the night school. Well, they learn all of these rituals in their dream state. And you're actually able to, have this lucid experience. And this happened for people who were disconnected from family lineages or weren't part of a family. It's a way for them still to learn the same information. Again, it's all in the hands of the spirits, taking you to the night school, wherever it is. Um, and it looks like regular daily life, it looks very similar to a parallel you would see on Earth. And so, that's one of the things that I love about what my guides are, or these guides, I won't call them my guides, are teaching me, is that this information is accessible, but it is accessible from your spirit to spirits,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so that's where, because the knowledge is alive, the spirits are alive, the ancestors are alive, so that knowledge is living.
Beautiful. Wow. And I'm sure that a question that's on everyone's mind is, how do you see your guides? Do you do you
Okay.
see them?
Sometimes I
Hear
see them,
them?
absolutely. Sometimes I
Mhm.
hear them. More than that, I would like to encourage everyone that probably the most important thing to be able to recognize about your guides is the way their energy presents itself to you. We are all so connected to being a human being and seeing things with our naked eye that we're so connected to form. Like, oh, please give me some clairvoyant visions. I really like those, right? They're exciting. But what I learned from the different guides, whether it was Iside or Aradia, Diana, Cibele, onward, all of the saints and Madonnas, is they will love to connect us as a way of reassuring us that we're not crazy and that we're on a path through symbols like, this is what I look like, this how many stars I wear in the halo in photographs that you can find, or this is what these are some things you can find on my robe, so that you can research and say, okay, other people saw her this way and she was depicted in this way. And if I go back further in time, I find these same symbols. But it's
Mhm.
most important, my guides taught me that it's most important to pay attention to the sensations and feelings. I liken it to like, when you meet someone and you think you're falling in love, it's really the universe saying, hey, we're moving you into feeling another person, into feeling yourself as spirit. You're not used to doing this. So you feel like all your cells are opening and they're tingling. So in those moments, you're feeling yourself as a spirit. When your guides introduce themselves to you and the divinities, they mostly want you to feel their energy, because their energy is full of also the type of knowledge they're going to share with you. So some divine feminine beings feel really, really powerful, like warrioresses. Their energy almost feels like it makes you sit upright and pay attention. It may make you become very serious about boundaries, where like before you couldn't set one, now you become ruthless to clean your. Some feels very, very sensual and they want to restore your sensual and sexual energy. So they all have, it's like meeting a friend also. We sometimes meet friends thinking like that, here's what they look like, here's their sense of humor. But when we're separated from our friend, it's we have some time to think about who our friend is as a sensation, as an energy. And the reason
Mhm.
this is really important in terms of connecting with our guides is that we're not always going to be able to see them in technicolor. But if we have situations where we need to use our guides through a reading, through a ritual we're giving, or maybe we're in a situation of a little bit of danger, and we need to feel our guide's presence, we need to be able to just feel them there, right there behind ourselves, or right there in front of us, or wherever their position of support they take is. We need to be able to hear them in a quick moment. And, we can't hold on to the physical because they're not
Wow.
physical. They take a form to help us, lead us on a trail of recognizing I'm real. And here's some ways that
Yeah.
you may be able to identify with me, but it's their energy that's the most important.
Yeah.
And as a person
Absolutely.
who's channeling or as a medium, spirits don't have bodies. They move faster than we do. So what happens if you're in a room full of spirits? You need to learn to be able to say, who is this one? Who is this one? Is this one a helper? Is this one a spy? Where are my help? Where's my crew? And the way that I can identify them the quickest is through the feelings,
Mhm.
and then through thoughts and ideas, and then through physicality.
This is
That
so
help you?
important. Yeah, absolutely. Because as someone who is not very visual, and I started all of my awakening through my body and the sensations
Okay.
in my body, it was always a thing where I thought, well, I can't see anything. So,
This is
um,
important to talk
and,
about.
and now, and now I also always tell my students, no, there's feeling too,
Yes.
and it's really important. Yeah.
Yes, because I also see in a lot of contemporary spirituality, people are really human identified. I have all my tools. I know my line of ancestors, and it's very like these are the things that I can have and hold and put in a box. And we're so used to being this being. I'm Karen with a body. I know what goes on in my thoughts and my emotions all day long. But we forget that physically, this is just finite matter. And that, yeah, our family has a lineage through DNA and blood and things like this. But that is a human experience. It's very limited. When you feel clumsy or doubtful, uh, you know, these are things that are very human. We forget that when we're feeling great or we're feeling in the flow or we're feeling or sensing things that are larger than life or magical, that's when our spirit is taking up a little more of our awareness than our physical body. They're not married, they're different things. And so, I like to encourage people, if you don't know who your ancestors are, you can meet them as energies. You're not blocked off from that. If you're someone who's trying to navigate magic or your spirit world or rituals and you don't see anything, you're in a great starting place because you are not experiencing based on preconceived notions. And that's what form really is. We get so used to form, people are like, oh, here's Karen. I'm so used to Karen. I think I know everything about Karen because I saw Karen. But, I'm an ever evolving being. We all are. I'm just saying, like, you meet me as Karen. You met me more maybe Karen as a voice. But all of us, we meet each other and we think like we know a lot about each other because of our presence. When people are researching guides or ancestors, sometimes they feel like, oh, I learned everything about them because I saw who they were and they stopped the exploration. But the exploration really comes through memories, intangible feelings. Like when you meet ancestors in your meditation, you might not always see them, but if you can kind of relax yourself, slow down a little bit, maybe sink into your chair, start
Mm.
asking them some questions, sometimes those memories can float through, or their preference of the type of clothes they used to wear, or a scent of an herb. It's okay to not hold on to forms so much and to move into a little bit of formlessness to receive information.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Great.
And then just one last question. I would talk to you for hours and hours.
It's a pleasure.
What would you say to someone who's starting out who might feel a little bit scared of some of these energies? Because the feminine way is very inclusive of the
Yes.
dark and the light, and it's very
Yes.
much an alchemical path. But when someone is a little bit afraid of that dark, what would you
Yes,
say?
I work with a lot of people who have this experience, or this fear based on experience. And I would say that your preparation work is the most important. And I don't mean preparation necessarily before you start a meditation or a journey or a ritual, although that is important. Preparation really begins in your mind. And I like to encourage people to know that your mind is a tool for your spirit, which resides. The rural Italian belief is that in your belly, which we know where the vagus nerve is, this is the mouth of the soul, okay? This is your belly is where you get most of your feelings and sensations and to tell your brain what's happening. Well, we are not taught this really. So your mind you can use as a tool. For example, when I was young, I grew up in a lot of dangerous experiences, a lot of darkness, but my mind somehow was like, I hold on my fort is important to me and I'm aware of the dark spirits and the light, but I am going to protect my space because I know what I want to learn. I know what I want to experience. So this is a way to prepare. Ask yourself, what do you want to learn from the world of spirits? What do you want to learn from the universe as a whole? What do you want to learn as a spirit in a human body? You don't have to define it all right away, but if you're wanting to learn how to heal, how to help, to research, the truth of a lineage, this will help align you with the kinds of guides and helpers who have that knowledge, who can never be, those lower ones. And then, you can do some prep work, like create your own prayer for having an experience for your highest expansion so that you can see what you need to see, but maybe not be touched by it. I try to teach classes on this because it's quite complex. Another thing I like to do is teach people how to make an intentional circle. So let's say you just are about to meditate and you don't know a lot of the other mechanics. Well, use your words and your voice to declare what your experience will be. This channeling practice for me is for my highest good, for my learning to connect with beings who want to protect me and help me expand, who want to encourage the reclamation of my power, things like this, declaring what you allow your space to be. And then it's important to not just go into the void unless you are brave and happy and you want to just go into the void. One of the ways you can safely start exploring is using images or ideas of like floating up to the moon, floating up to the Milky Way, or if that's a little too scary to start with, imagine that you're floating up maybe on, a balloon or your heart to a cloud above your house or your apartment, so that you're giving these vibrations to the universe that, look, I'm trying to raise my vibration by imagining I'm going up or moving a little bit faster. Why? Because the helpers are not embodied. Their energy is more subtle. Naturally, it vibrates on a frequency on that psychic radio station at a very, very fast vibration. So it's a little bit harder to feel them. So you make your effort, to set a space with some intentions, maybe even a purpose to meet my own guardian guide. Set some instructions, make a prescription for what it is you're seeking, the best that you can. This is prep work. And then you can imagine floating up, flying up, lifting up a little bit to a place that you feel okay, but that where your energy is a little bit less physical, so that you can feel the subtlety of the guides. Then allow yourself to fill with, I like to use white and golden light as a frequency. And when you're filled with that light on your cloud or in the moon, then begin inviting in a guide, a helper, an ancestor who can help you answer the questions that you're seeking answers for. So try to be specific in the beginning. And these are some really
Yeah.
simple ingredients that tend to help people who, because a lot of people ask me, oh, what do I do? I start to meditate and everything comes in. Well, if you can get a little specific about what it is you want, raise your vibration up. When you raise your vibration up to those faster places, which for you can, be the Milky Way, the moon, a cloud, visually, those lower lower vibration beings, they don't want to go there, they don't want to go to the light, they don't want to heal, so you automatically like leave them behind in another vibrational neighborhood. Now you may have to learn about how to see them and learn from them at a later date, but let's start with connecting with your team, which is at a faster frequency, a faster vibration, and then they will help protect you and weed out some of the miscellaneous lower things so that you can learn from those lower beings, but in a way that you feel prepared for as much as you can. Because I do have to say, the Italian rural traditions, even among the healers and the grandmas, they know how to navigate the light and the dark. You cannot avoid it in those
Yeah.
traditions. So it's
It's
you
really,
will experience them, but
it's
you will do it
true.
in a way that you're protected and you can learn from. But they're very
Yeah.
powerful too.
I love that word prescription. It's a bit of a
Yes.
prescription and then attunement, prescription and then attunement. Yeah, I
Yes. To
love
be
that very
specific.
much.
No, I just
Thank
wanted to say,
you.
you may have read in my book, but for people who don't know, I have zero Italian blood in this life. Just to let past life, sure, married into some people that matters, some people that doesn't. But just to let what you're seeking from your lineage or the family world, it's the world of the spirit helpers who
Yeah,
handed this knowledge down that can really help you go where you need. I just like to say that as an encouragement.
yes,
When you practice your skills and learning to discern, then you don't need anybody else but yourself and
yeah.
your guides and spirits to take you where you need to go.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's so true. We come to the ancestral through the spirit world. Once we've connected to the spirit world, the ancestral also feels kind of that it's imbued with so much more, like the objects that we were talking about before,
Yeah.
the rituals. Yeah.
Because our ancestors are physical, but our spirit doesn't go along the same family lines when it reincarnates and has a new experience. So
Yeah.
your soul wants to have a new experience with every lifetime, but your spirit
You're
can still
carrying.
connect with the ancestors you're connected to in a physical lineage. They will help you as they can. Although I've met some people with really powerful, ancestors who are like, oh, they're not quite ready yet. But it's really wonderful. And I'd like to encourage people too who feel like they're not in a family that welcomes their abilities. You can probably
Mm,
find ancestors down the line who have your abilities and will help you at least feel encouraged for the time being.
yeah.
There are all sorts of ways to feel seen, heard, validated about who you are, that because I find a lot of people whose abilities are just growing through them because their spirit is like, I want to expand, but they don't have a lot of support around them. And so that's a hard way to
Yeah.
navigate.
Yes, thank you. This is a beautiful reminder, and everything that we've spoken about today is also, for any culture, really, that reminder of coming back to the spirit world for guidance and our ancestors for guidance. Yes, thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Karyn, so you've written two books.
Yes.
And so the first one is Italy's modern medicine women and witches.
Volume one,
Yeah.
working on
Oh, you
volume
want
two.
you're working on some more. You're so prolific. And these are big books as well, aren't
Yes. Oh my
they?
goodness. They're all like in the 300-page range.
That's incredible. So yeah, you're such an incredible channel for these teachings. And then the book that's coming out now is Italian Magic.
It's called Italian Magic, Secret Lives of Women, even though it's not just for women. I make a statement in there. But if you loved the first book and hearing the stories of these different healers and herbalists and some of my experience with the world of spirits, this is a book that gives details. There's photos, there's ingredients of cures and magical spells. There are specific plant lists. So it's really a book about specifics as much as I could get into it with ritual, birth rituals, death rituals. If you're someone who's a
Wow.
death doula and you're not sure where this comes from, you're going to learn a whole new perspective on it from the rural world. There's a whole chapter on the spirit teachers like La Signora del Gioco and the nymphs and the great fairy. There are all sorts of things that might really surprise you in there. Some private photos, some pictures where I reenacted ingredients, so that you can see them. But it's really about specifics. So it'll be a sort of reference guide visually and in words that you can use. And I'm really excited to share it for that reason. I think sometimes the pictures really bring things home
Yeah.
or help and I couldn't fit everything in. I mean, this book, it's already like 360 pages or something, but there was so much
Yeah.
more that I really wanted to put in, but it gives you a nice look into birth traditions, death traditions, how they're connected, cures, medical magical cures from different regions and islands. And it was the best that I could do at this time to try to give like again, like a reference guide.
This is an incredible volume of work.
Very excited.
Incredible. Exactly. Yeah. And you're not, and are you going back soon as well? Because it sounds like you're on to the next project
Yeah,
already.
well, I'm already writing volume two, as I said, and it's a lot about men, which I'm very excited to share, and a whole nother Italian tradition that I haven't talked about too much. But I'm waiting to go. My friends are waiting there in Italy with their hands open, saying, "Okay, when the time is right, we're here to catch you." So I hope it's really, really soon. It's interesting. I didn't feel guided to buy an airplane ticket this time. And then I did actually get one for the winter. But then my book is
Mm.
coming out now. So I'm here to take care of the book. And then, I'm not sure when I'm going back, but
Oh,
I am
well,
just like, please,
yeah.
I'm having a really hard time being here, not there.
I know, me too, me too. And hopefully our paths will cross. They almost
Oh,
did
we
when
almost
we were in
did.
Lazio, but yeah, maybe,
Yes.
yeah, another
That would be
time.
so great.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also people can find you. We'll put all of your links below. And
Thank you.
do you want to tell us where people can find you and what your current offerings are?
Sure. I have a website called Karyn Crisis Heals, and that's where I have my school. I'm about to relaunch all the old and new classes, so it'll probably be another week till you see the school filled up. That's where I also announce trances, and there are some trances coming up. That's where I also give readings and have information about my book that's, I'm selling as a pre-order right now. And I do have my Instagram, which is Karyn.crisis. I spell my name with a Y,
Mhm.
Karyn, which is interesting because it's connected to the Greek spelling for the walnut and the walnut tree in Italy. But anyway,
Oh, the
that's
walnut tree. We didn't get to the walnut tree. I
we
was
did
gonna
it. So
I was
many
gonna ask
things.
about that.
But those are the best places to find me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. The walnut tree is it was considered a very magical place though, wasn't it,
It's
for
considered one of those places that people were taken to be pulled into the realm of astral dreams to learn from, the great spirits, female spirits who were teaching them divination techniques, oh my goodness, all sorts of secret things, how to use plants, make filters, how to cure, divination, of course. Also, a lot of techniques on how to find like the right partner and how to, restore your sensual energy if you've lost it. It was basically all of the things that we try to learn in our modern energy classes. They would be taken to the walnut tree either to learn around the tree as like because they believed that the goddess manifested herself in trees, or as a point of reference before they were like some people were invited to a particular place, a landscape before they went into the astral realm, or they would gather there in the astral realm. So the walnut tree was really famously known even in Sicily, Sardinia, for the witches who gathered at the walnut tree, which is just one of the magic trees where people were taken to learn
wow.
from the spirits these traditions and rural, magic.
Wow, it sounds incredible. It feels like you've been in that spiral of the walnut tree since you were born.
Yes, yes. And I went to the place where allegedly the original one, grew and was chopped down, during the witch hunts. And it's a whole nother
Well, there is
magical
an
place.
original one. There is the
Yeah, you can
yeah.
even Google medieval maps about the walnut tree, and you can go if you know locals. It's not too hard to find this place in Campania. It's like where a river is, and three magical buildings that are seen to protect the area. And nearby, sort of, is the mountaintop with remnants of the temple to Cibele and the first Madonna statue that's still standing, made of black stone. So it's like this place where people really believe she manifested herself physically in these spots, but that they were also taken there, in the dream world to meet and learn these things as a group in group dreaming. And so the walnut tree near Benevento is known to be a real tree that grew, that people, visually identified with. There are lots of places around Italy and Sicily and Sardinia where people identifiably were like, I was taken to that plane, or we gathered around this oak tree or this lime tree. But the walnut tree was written about in some of the Inquisition documents, so it's the most famous.
Oh my
The
goodness.
walnut tree of Benevento
Incredible.
specifically.
Anyway, that's incredible. My goodness. Okay. So maybe we'll one day we'll meet around the walnut tree.
Oh, yay! Would love it.
Oh, Karyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no,
And
thank you, Carlotta. It's been so
such a
exciting.
pleasure. It was so fun. And I can really highly, highly recommend a reading with you so much. I mean,
Oh,
it's,
thank
I have one every time I can.
you.
Because, there's so much vision and growth comes through every time.
Oh,
It's
thank
really
you. Thank
incredible.
you.
So
Give it up to the guides all the time. It's all the
yes,
guides.
I know. Yeah. So thank you so much as the
Thank you.
sunlight's coming in
I know it's like,
to
woo.
your face. Okay, lovely. So yes, all your details will be here on the video,
Thank
and
you.
I'm really excited for people
Oh,
to listen to this.
thank you so much. What a wonderful way to spend my afternoon.
Oh, thank you.
Ciao,
Okay.
ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
A presto.
A presto.